Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luhr, and I'm delighted to have a fellow German sports marketing veteran with me on the line here today, calling in from Hamburg, Mr. Robert Müller von Vultejus. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Thanks, Marcus. Great for having me.
Yeah, no, I looking forward to our conversation because we both started just about the same time in this beautiful industry, around 1994. We're of similar age as well, and so we're somehow been running around the world of sports marketing at the same time, even though in completely different parts of the world. As much as we're both German, I've actually never worked in Germany, oddly enough, and obviously you spent the majority of your career there. And so we're going to be digging into all those fun stories you have, because the most interesting part really is that as much as you've worked in obviously multiple brands, in one way or the other, and it's just a generalization, of course, a bit, you pretty much worked in the same company your whole life, right? And we're obviously going to dig into this, what that actually means or what I mean with it. But as always, as we always kick it off, tell us a bit how you got into the industry. And what made you get into the world of sports?
Yeah, Marcus, happy to do so. When I finished school, actually, I was a bit clueless. My favorite thing was sports. I didn't want to become a sport teacher, so I started to study sports and economics for sport management at the beautiful city of Bayreuth, which is in southern Germany. Yes. Still the role model for sports marketing in Germany. And after that, after finishing that, I've created, together with some friends, a small agency. And we've organized the first national basketball team in town at the time. And at the same time, I worked as a DJ on student parties. So,
all right.
So what a funny time, was interesting. And one morning, I still had a hangover. I got a call from a good old friend who studied together with me and who started to work in a company called UFA Sports, which was one of the leading companies at the time, as you said, 94. So the beginning of the Wild West of our industry, so to say. And he said, are you interested to move to Hamburg and to start working for UFA in the television trading department? And I said, of course. And that's how everything started. So I had my interview at a halftime break at a Champions League match in Munich with my former boss, Bernd Hoffman. And 2 weeks later, I started my professional career.
Awesome. And now, so let's call that UFA Sports 1.0, because we're going to come back to it, of course, later again. So who was the owner at that time? How long were they around by the time you joined them? You said they were one of the more established ones already at that time, right?
Yeah. So I think the company was created end of the 80s by Bertelsmann, or maybe what's more known, RTL Group, the biggest private media network in Europe at the time.
Yep.
And the first deal I did was a 4-year worldwide distribution deal with Wimbledon, followed by the same scope with the US Open, so 2 tennis deals. And then one day there was a gentleman from Serbia walking into the room and saying, I have the media rights of Red Star Belgrade, the most known team from Serbia. And they played the semifinal, and I interested in acquiring these rights, and there was a smart guy to say, why not? Because Bayern Munich was in the semis as well, and there was a draw at the time for the semifinal, and luckily Red Star Belgrade was drawn against Bayern Munich, and the company made $1 million Deutschmark at the time profit with this just one deal. And so people say, that seems to be an interesting business model. So let's move on and collect some of the international rights of these teams playing in Europe, in the Champions League or in the European Cups or whatever. And this was exactly also my first job. So flying around in Europe, from country to country, negotiating and signing deals with the domestic champions from local leagues or participants in these European Cups, and and that was really a fun part. We got to know interesting characters of our industry, and also making a lot of money for the company.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this was the old arbitrage game at the absolute most creative part, right? Just buying this, somewhat, hoping the right matches show up. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you don't. And I think you made a comment here that there was a lot of suitcases with cash ready to go, at the draws in Switzerland there every time, because people were just there, I guess, and I'm sure IMG and others who were already in that game at that time too, right? We're all there and handing out checks and getting signing deals. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, to an extent that's true. So you have to see that in these years Europe changed quite dramatically, right? The former Soviet Union fell apart. The same for the countries being today Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia, Slovenia, etc. So suddenly, I think UEFA grew from like 38 countries to 52, and there were a lot of countries just coming out of a war where there was no existing banking system. So the only currency was cash, and when you wanted to do a deal with a football club in that region, you shouldn't try to do a deal and transfer money, because that didn't literally exist. So that's why and it was quite difficult, for a stock listed company like RTL at the time, to pursue their business. So we needed to convince our shareholders that this is the only way we can do these deals, and therefore we were indeed traveling with a bit of cash, to the draws in Geneva. Always in one, at the time quite famous hotel, the Noga Hilton, where all these draws took place. So where all the decision makers from these football clubs got together, and then we had literally the night before the draw, when we tried to secure the last deals, and then we more or less negotiated the entire night and did deals on small piece of papers or even napkins, just to make sure that on the next day, when the draw happened, we're on the safe side. It was kind of a lottery, as you mentioned before, so it was really an interesting part of my career, and also I think an interesting part of our industry at the time.
Absolutely.
And it lasted until more or less UEFA and also FIFA decided to centralize the qualifiers in like 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to that later, because clearly, somehow some of the groups you were involved in were again part of that, or were bidding, of course, for it. But that really, of course, dramatically changed then. So we're in UFA Sports 1.0 here, and then there was a merger, right, with Sport Plus, which was at that time part of Canal Plus. How did that happen? Was it Bertelsmann just divesting out, or what was the sort of motivation there?
Yeah, I think the story at the time was that there were two entrepreneurs. On one side, the leader of Bertelsmann, and on the other side, Jean-Marie Weber, who was running Vivendi Universal in France. The biggest pay TV operator in France, Canal Plus, was belonging to that group. And these two gentlemen decided, that it seems to be a good idea to create the biggest sports marketing agency in the world. And so therefore we have merged UFA Sports together with Sport Plus, which was a sports marketing arm of Canal Plus at the time. And there was a third player, which was a French sports marketing entrepreneur, very old school, a group, Jean-Claude Darmon.
That's right.
And so therefore,
I remember the name.
Yeah, very interesting character. So, and for a couple of years, he became the CEO of that new group.
Right.
That was in 2003 or 2002, and that was when I became a managing director of UFA Sports, actually.
Right. Now, again, with this sort of merger, and I know Jerome Walker was there as well, who later on, of course, also moved on to FIFA, etc., and all well-known characters here. Before we, so what was what worked and what didn't work within, because it was a bit of a German-French combo here, right? And I remember having lots of conversation with guys like yourself at that time. It was never easy. It seemed to be that way, right? Maybe, but how did it look from the inside?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely not a marriage which we, from a management level, wish to have. And suddenly we found ourselves into such a new situation. And then the first thing what happened was that we needed to have a new name. And and we were thinking about a brainstorming session about a new name. And then suddenly Jean-Claude Damore, the new CEO, called us and said, I found one. And then he explained to us that the new name of that company should be Sportfive. Mm-hmm. So, and we were a bit shocked because Sportfive, what does that mean, right? I mean, nobody really associated anything to Sportfive. Right. But he thought it's a good idea. We are operating on all 5 continents in the world, so okay. Let's call it Sportfive. So. And then we figured out very quickly that we were coming from very different cultures, both business cultures, but even the French and the German culture, needs to be managed to fit together. So it's not an automatic fit. And this is what we found out quite quickly, and also our shareholders found out very quickly, and therefore they decided, I think, just 3 years after, to resell the company again. And that was, I think, in 2005 or 2004, when that was exactly the sale of the company to a private equity firm, Advent International, right. Which was also within my career a great step, because together with Advent and the German management, we were able to acquire the company. So we have co-invested, and that was obviously also a great opportunity for ourselves.
Interesting. So then for a couple, and we'll get to the next part in right after this. But for a while, of course, then you are, part of a private equity group, and that's always interesting. I mean, we've had a private equity group in TSA over years as well, and they just bring a different type of thinking into it. So what was really the strategy at that time? Just keep growing and building it for the next sell. I mean, that's really obviously what these guys normally look for, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we were very ambitious in growing the company within our existing business models, which was more or less twofolded. On one side, we were still doing, very much media rights trading at the time. When the company was acquired. We were in a position to have all 5 big leagues in our portfolio: the Premier League, the Serie A, La Liga, the German League, and the French League. So we're a really strong position in the market. We have, on the other side, created a model which we have called comprehensive marketing on club level. Mm-hmm. So the first deal we signed was in Germany, the club in Berlin, Hertha Berlin. Mm-hmm. With a 10-year deal where we were responsible for all commercial assets, from sponsorship sales, hospitality, right. All kind of assets connected with the club. And that's something which we copy-pasted a couple of times and scaled also into other markets. And we had a portfolio of, in Europe, I would say 25 clubs, with a stronghold in Germany, with Borussia Dortmund as one of our key clients, but also Lyon, for example, in France, etc. And so that was the ambition to grow on the sponsorship side in the same way as on the media trading side. Right. And that was the idea.
How much at that time were you already putting up big checks? Was it still times where you were doing things as an agency, or was it really putting money up and then running around and recovering it?
Yeah, I mean, every deal obviously is a bit different, but you don't get these mandates without a strong commitment. And sometimes, it's a signing fee you pay up front. Sometimes it's a minimum guarantee. Sometimes there was kind of a loan facility or a prepayment. Sometimes there was kind of a shortfall guarantee mechanism. So, a lot of different models, and every deal we did with a rights holder was to a certain degree different. But obviously, the level of commitment, the level of investment, also on a recurring rate was already very, very high.
And that was Advent funding this, or having creative ways to manage this, or was it just purely based on own revenue streams and cash flow which you guys were generating?
Yeah, normally, the private equity model is not really to finance individual projects, right? They acquire the company, and then normally you are on your own to finance the business. So you always need to be mindful and cautious, obviously, on trying to get the right balance on cash out and cash in. Obviously, sometimes you have to pre-finance operations, but then you have to make sure that this is somehow in line with the cash flows coming in. So at the time, the company and also when we sold it was quite cash rich. So I think we had an EBITDA at the end of the process before we sold on the company to the next shareholder of around 90 to 100 million. So that was quite substantial.
Yep.
And therefore that wasn't too much of an issue. But you're right, driving such a large operation and making sure that, particularly for these media rights where you have normally a 3 to 4 year sales period, you need to make sure that for the next cycle you're prepared and ready to finance it again.
Yep. Yeah, and as we all know, that model worked very well for a long time. I would say at the moment that model is difficult and maybe in some cases disappeared in my mind at least, but maybe we'll touch on that a bit later. But while we keep going through the iterations and of the company, and as you already alluded to, obviously there was another sell, and at this time it was to another French group, Lagardere, in 2007 for a very large check, I guess reported 160 million euros. How did that? Was that again just Advent saying, "Look, we've built it up now. There's a good time to cash out whatever they had previously paid, get a good return on their money, and move on"? Was that sort of basically, or was there anything more beyond that?
No, I mean the typical business model of a private equity firm obviously is to acquire a company and then to sell it, and this is exactly what happened. So RTL still kept a stake of 20%.
Okay.
Together with Advent, and then we sold together. So Advent, RTL, and the management to Lagardere in the year 2006, end of 2006, for $1 billion. So the deal was even much higher than what you just said. So it's 860 million euro at the time to Lagardere, and. That was an huge deal, interesting experience again, because so far for the shareholders it worked out quite well. But I think we discovered very quickly that I think for the company it might have not been the right move. But for us as a management team, and we found it out very quickly that we don't want to be part of that journey anymore. So the first thing Lagardere did was they fired the CEO of the company, which was part of our management team.
Who was
a good friend?
Who was the CEO?
That was Philip Cordis.
Oh, Philip. All right. Okay. Yeah, of course.
Philip, and we were not only friends, but we were a very strong team, very tight, very very close, and actually, we sold a very, very successful company. So nobody understood what's going on, what happened. And for us, it was a clear signal that this might not be the right place for the next step of our future. So therefore, the entire management team left the company. So I was, that was in 2007. I was on garden leave for 12 months, which was quite nice. And then, we were there without a job, with a lot of experience, obviously, and a good network. And we said, okay, is it something we can do again? And then we got together, Philip, and also Stefan Felding, who's the current CEO also of Sportfive, and me. And so, let's do it together. And then we said, okay, how do we do it? Because we want to create our own company. We said, to do this kind of business, we need an investor, right? We need money. We don't want to start small. We want to reach a certain scale in a short period of time. We can't do that on our own. So we were negotiating with a few investors, and at the end of the day, we found RTL again, our previous investor, to say,
right.
yeah, why not? And then we say, okay, if we have the same management team like before, if we have the same shareholder like before, why don't we choose the same name? And therefore, we choose UFA Sports again to create a new company, a startup, really a greenfield operation, but with a lot of ingredients which we had before as well.
Yep. So that now we're at UFA Sports 2.0 here, which is great, which is an interesting one. And as you shared, and I recall, you guys grew again very quickly. Obviously, you had a great team of people. Therefore, you knew what to do. So you grew, over 100 people again with offices around the world. In a very short period of time. What was the sort of the driving there? Was it just, again, was there already a bit of a new business model you guys were exploring, or is, again, just, as you said, what you called it earlier, copy and pasting what was successful previously?
Yeah, I think we did a little bit of both, right? I mean, I think in 2008 and the following years, we already realized that the media market is changing, and so therefore we needed to change our business model as well. And I think still, selling media rights to established broadcasters was still the right thing to do. And actually, the thing what also rights holders expected from agency partners, but on a far more transparent way, right? So moving from a very transparent model where you just acquired and resold rights more to a very open book policy-oriented cooperation model with rights holders, where rights holders were signing the deals themselves, and we acted as a full-service provider, still with commitments, but in a totally transparent way. And I think that was very much appreciated by the market, because none of the, at that time, established companies went that way. It's always easier if you do something new, right, than to change something within an existing organization. So that was maybe our advantage, and that helped us to grow and to develop the business within a couple of years' time.
But it was still very much, a media business, or you were also doing some of the sponsorship and other things as well again?
Yeah, and we started actually in Germany also with a small portfolio of club deals, where a quite nice, maybe kind of a niche portfolio of some second division teams and some smaller first division clubs of different kind. So people are familiar with German football know the very famous club St. Pauli. It's a typical second division team with a lot of high values. So it's more than a football club, right? It's more mindset which comes with it. So. And so it was fun to work for a club which is, if you look at the commercial opportunity, far more storytelling than selling existing advertising inventory. Right. And I think if you see now how the market has changed, I think then you see that most of the big football brands have been moving into that direction, from selling whatever LED sequences or LED boards or shirts into storytelling and true partnership with brands, and this is what we tried out already at that time. So
interesting. And I remember that actually having some conversations with Philip about it. That's obviously a long time ago. What was your role exactly? You were the head of media or the head of Germany, or what was exactly what was you doing within the group or within the company?
Within the new company, we were 3 CEOs, and we did a bit of everything at the beginning. Later on, I moved a bit more to the sponsorship side, where Stefan took care of Asia, and Philip was very much dealing with European rights holders still on the media side. So, but again, we were together. We used our existing network from the time, so everybody did a bit of everything. That was maybe a huge advantage on one side, and maybe also created a bit of a problem at the end of the day, because I would say, we were operating the company a bit too opportunistically. And if you do too many things at the same time, also, you start to struggle.
Spread yourself thin. Yes, I know that.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that well.
Yes.
Now, here's a question. And again, we're in a big. The world is in big trouble, right? And we're talking about now. When you guys started was 2008 as well, right? Where we had a global crisis. How much was that impacting you guys at that time? Because you were starting the new business, or it wasn't really because you were small and therefore you kind of were riding out the first couple of years and then grew from there.
Yeah, I think for us the impact wasn't too big because we didn't need to defend an existing portfolio, right? The problem is if you have a strong portfolio which you acquired for substantial money,
yep.
and then you certainly realize that you have a problem on the execution side, on the revenue side, then you're in trouble. But
yep.
we were not in that place, right? We started the company in 2008 from scratch, so we were already creating that company within that environment, and therefore it didn't really have a big impact on the business.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, funny enough, you ended up selling this whole thing again back to Lagardere. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so so RTL did a re-IPO. I think it was in 2014. Or prepared the re-IPO in 2014, and with that they wanted to clear the portfolio a bit, and explain to us that they would like to sell us. And we said, okay, fine, great, why not? Then let's look for a new shareholder. And so therefore we have reached out to some of the companies we would have liked to work with, and the only company which was on the blacklist, more or less, was Lagardere. So that was more or less the only company we didn't talk with at the beginning, because we said, that's what we already had, right, a couple of years back, and there were good reasons, to leave the company. So and that hasn't changed. So so we talked with Wasserman at the time. We were already very close in 2014 to sell UFA Sports to Wasserman Group, with Casey and the guys. So we were very close and also very excited. But we even had an appointment at the notary, and then within the last couple of days before that, the deal fell apart. Okay. And then we started from scratch again. And then there was my old friend Philip Hasenbein, who was a good friend from university times. Also being based in Hamburg, and in the meantime became the CEO of Lagardere Sports in Germany. And he said, actually, why don't we speak about that? I mean, what's the problem? So, and can I please show you the new Lagardere? There's a new management team. A lot has changed, and I would like to convince you that it might be a good opportunity. And Marcus, since we met each other, we always met in Monaco at the Sportel, and the conversation I had with Philip was also, I think it was Sportel 2014. We had dinner, and we say, why not? I mean, let's maybe spend that little time and have a look at whether this might have really be changed and might have become an opportunity also for us. And this is how everything started. And 6 months later, we went again to the notary. This time, without any hiccups, and then we signed the deal for the transaction to sell UFA Sports to Lagardere.
For the second time, so to speak. Interesting. Now, again, let's talk a little bit about Lagardere then. So we're in 2015 now. And of course, recently everyone will remember the company again was sold. So over the last 5 years, again, the agency business has dramatically changed, right? And I remember stories coming out of Lagardere. We're no longer putting money up. We're changing the model. We're not going to compete anymore for putting stupid money on the table and all this stuff. So there was a lot of those things going on. I think it was clear that Arnold Lagardere's vision of building this big empire by initially buying Sportfive in the first place, adding smaller agencies, IEG, World Sport here in Asia, etc. From God knows what else from other parts of the world. I think he bought an agency in the US as well. Can't remember their name now.
Donald Dell.
Donald Dell's,
friend,
exactly. My buddy Donald, but I can't
yeah.
remember his name of the agency they had there. But doesn't matter. So again, the vision was always it was nothing. There was nothing wrong with the idea, right? Bringing smart businesses together with strong teams around the world who know what they're doing. Whether it was Seamus here in Asia or you guys in Europe. But where did it not work? What was it? Was it again culture? Was it leadership? Where would you put your finger on this?
So first of all, I think when you acquire an agency, you need to have a very clear idea of what you want to do with that. And I think that Lagardere acquired all these companies because he had a very personal interest in sports, which is good, right? But I think acquiring a company like us and maybe also like World Sports Group, doing a lot of business in television trading, and on the other side buying consulting businesses or player agents, that has in the first place nothing to do with each other, right? Totally different areas, totally different business models, and only because it's all sports marketing, there's not an automatic synergy. Correct. So and when Lagardere acquired these companies, what happened was that all these brands were still existing for many years. I think there was a rebranding only in 2015. So for the duration of 8 years, World Sports Group, Sportfive, IEC in sports, and all the other players in the market were operating with their own brand, with their own business model, with their own team, with their own offices. And there was a time and place where we had, I think, 3 or 4 offices in Singapore alone. Wow. Within the Lagardere ecosystem, all going against each other, right? So there was no collaboration. So there was even more competition within the own group. So there was no added value, which he created by acquiring these companies. And at the same time, when you acquire the company from the founder, you need to think about his retention. So how can you motivate him to stay on board? Because he was the one who successfully created that business. Yep. And you cannot believe that somebody coming from a corporate environment is in the same moment in a position to manage it maybe even better than the one who has created it. So, and this is what happened. So many of the founders that just walked away. The business was left aside. There were people coming from the French corporate organization, trying to manage it. And this doesn't happen. I mean, what are we? I mean, an agency is predominantly, a group of people with some computers and a room and maybe some phones, not more, right? We're not producing anything. So you need to take care of your people. If you don't take care of your people, you lose them, and then you lose grip on the market, you lose network and relationships, and then you lose contracts in the next place. And this is exactly what happened between 2008 and 2020. And therefore now, and we come now to the next chapter, the transaction which happened early this year, where Lagardere then realized that he wants to sell, or maybe he needs to sell the business. He started a process about 2 years ago, which the process in total took quite some time.
Yeah, it was fairly well documented.
Well documented in the press, yes.
Yeah.
And then finally, he sold the business to, again, a private equity firm, which is HIG, the current shareholder. Yeah. And again, we as a management are very happy because we have another opportunity to invest together with HIG in the company. All right. Now with the ambition to grow it again, from a very, to our extent, quite small foundation, right?
Yeah, and we'll definitely we're going to spend a bit of time on, of course, what is the new, and I won't say the name now yet, but I want to just make one comment to Lagardere. One thing, it looked to me, and what you mentioned earlier, that he kept the company name separate, even competing with each other, and that would look to me like it was the WPP model, right? That's what Martin Sorrell built there in WPP was whatever 500 or 1,000 businesses he bought around the world, and in many cases, there were similar agencies competing with each other. So my guess is someone was looking at that and saying, why wouldn't that not work in sports, right? And I guess it didn't. We all know that by now, but it's interesting, right? why that is, why it didn't happen. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think you can make that work, but you need to understand the DNA of each and every company. You need to understand the motivation why maybe a former owner or founder wants to sell the business. You need to understand his motivation maybe to still stay in the business, or if not, how you can replace them, on a high level. And also, and this is maybe the most important thing, how you integrate them and form them together into something new.
Absolutely.
I think if you acquire a company, it's always the same question. So what do you buy, and what's the roadmap to make it more successful, and then either to keep it or to resell it? And I think it's doable also within the agency environment. And we've proven that with the former Sportfive company when we were acquired by Advent and then sold the business 4 years later again. So it's possible, but there's certainly some work to be done on making that sure, and that wasn't the case within Lagardere.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. I mean, we could talk about another hour on Lagardere here. There's all sorts of stories which pop in my head. But that's not where we want to go. Right now, we're back to Sportfive. You guys,
Yes.
You guys really like rehashing old names here. So we got Sportfive 2.0 now. After the, I guess, as you mentioned, HIG Capital buying the company. Why Sportfive again? What was the logic there, reason there?
There are several reasons to it actually, and we discussed it at length. Because in the first place, we said, maybe that's not really what we want to do and what we should do, because it might be perceived to be a big backwarded again. And we are today something totally different than we have been before we were renamed from Sportfive into Lagardere Sports. So therefore we really thought about it quite much. And then we said, at the end of the day, it's an established brand. It's well known. It stands for, something very positive, for quality, for strength, for, good people and good service. And therefore we finally decided to say, before we create something totally new again and explain, why, that the new name is actually the former Lagardere, the former Sportfive, the former UFA Sports. We rather create. We come back to Sportfive, which is established, and what you don't need to explain to someone else.
It reminds me of the artist formerly known as. That's really what you guys are. So now and it makes sense. I mean, I can follow this. I mean, it's a bit like Total Sports Asia. It's been the name for years, and we later on it became TSA, but it was always still it's that main name out there, which for good and bad people recognize, and I think there is value to those things. Now let's talk a bit about what is Sportfive 2.0 up to. How many folks are you? Where are the offices and all the fun stuff you guys are doing now in the traditional world, and of course and then we talk about our esports here.
I'm really more happy to speak about the Sportfive and the future, and not too much anymore about Lagardere.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we are a company now of around 1,000 people.
Wow.
Working in different parts of the world. We're a very strong business still, very much a football business, but also with some other sports in Europe. With about 500 people in Germany, about 150 people in France, about 150 people in the UK, offices in Poland, in Budapest, Hungary, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Spain, etc. Wow. So that's Europe. And then the European business is very much a business where we focus on sponsorship sales and hospitality, with all kind of digital services and digital product development attached to it. So I would say we are a sales house, and very much a sales house. Mm-hmm. In Asia, it's very much the same. So very much working on the right sort of sides with a strong business in China, in Singapore, which is our Asian headquarter. We've been working for many years with the AFC, as you know. We lost that contract to a Chinese competitor just lately.
He'll be up next on the podcast.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but we are still operating the Suzuki Cup, the Australian Open. We are representing the Australian Olympic Committee, so we're strong rights or representation also in Asia. And then if we move to the US, that's a mixture of a strong talent business and NFL, also in tennis and golf.
So is Donald still part of it? Is Donald still around?
Donald is still part of it, and
awesome.
then we have Steve Lloyd, which you might know as well, representing golf within our company with a strong golf business.
Okay.
And Joel Siegel. Joel Siegel is our CEO in the US, who's running a very, very successful talent business in the NFL. Just signed one of the most known and attractive running backs with Christian McCaffrey, which at least our American colleagues, I guess, all know. Mm. So and beside that, we're doing consulting for brands like Bridgestone, like Citibank, etc. And at the same place, invest into our sales resources to grow our sales capabilities. So we are very much, I would say, second to none as a sales business on sponsorship sales. Mm-hmm. We still do a lot of media rights globally with a still decent portfolio, which we want to grow further. And I think that our future is very much into making our core better and really strengthen our sales division in all respect, right? So particularly when it comes to building a sales platform and a marketing cloud, a strong sales tool actually, which will be able to increase even the presence in the market, and also making sure that rights holders are a better way of doing business with us than doing it on their own.
Interesting. Before we move on to, I definitely want to talk about what you're doing in esports, but I want to touch on something else. So the transaction obviously happened earlier this year, right? So maybe it was sort of just prior to COVID. And then COVID hit, which means the whole industry, shuts down pretty much overnight, and hasn't really restarted in a proper sense, in my view, at least. Now, I remember when it was 2008, we had 100 people, 7 offices across Asia, and then we had a global crisis, which was different than when we were talking about earlier with you guys, where you were a new agency at that time. We were at that time large and big, and was big overheads and all this stuff, and it was painful. Luckily we had, I guess, the reserves at that time to sustain it, but it was a very painful couple of years to kind of swinging out of it. I can only imagine with 1,000 people, that's a big overhead, and so how do you guys look at this? Is there the reserves are there to say, look, we're going to just, hunker down and sweat it out and the industry will come back, and or what is it what you guys are doing really at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think that, we're not lacking of opportunities in the market. I think there are plenty of great opportunities in the market. The thing is, and that's maybe how the agency landscape has changed, there was pressure on the margins, which as a result of, a market which moved from being very, very intransparent into far more transparency. So pressure on the margins, which results in more cost control and making sure that you're operating a lean organization with low redundancies, with more focus on making sure that you are right-sizing the organization in relation to your revenues. And I think this is an exercise everybody is doing and has to do. And I think COVID is not has not created that. It's more accelerating that process.
Right.
So I think I'm 100% convinced, and I really strongly believe in the future of agency in sports marketing. But the ingredients and the capabilities have dramatically changed. I think that, look, if you just imagine a rights holder, a big sports organization, a football club, whatever sports club, in a marketplace which gets more and more complex in all respect, right? So absolutely. When it comes to media rights, for example, just to pick that example, in the past, the skill set of an agency was very much determined by negotiation skills, braveness, the ability to take risks, yep, and to pre-finance these operations, and maybe access to the clients, the media platforms, etc. So that has changed now because the classical television model is changing, right? The old pay TV model is nearly dead. Yeah, so
that's what I called it.
Yeah, exactly. So there will be hardly any substantial money coming from pay TV operators in the future. You have a lot of streaming portals, big ones, small ones. You have the OTTs, etc. So for a rights holder, to define the right strategy, to commercialize the rights in between a B2B offering to established broadcasters to a B2C or D2C model where you have a product right for the end consumer, and how to operate that and to manage that, and to particularly to manage it also with sufficient content, I think is a challenge. So therefore, I think most of these rights holders, they can't do it alone. They need help. And therefore, as an agency, you just need to adopt on your abilities and your capabilities to help.
So if I interpret it correctly, as in you're looking to maybe position yourself a little more as maybe consultant is the bad word here, but to really to help them to figure out what is the new ecosystem those rights holders need to be in. Right? Rather than just being an outright sales agent, which is really what we all used to be, right?
No, we are still a sales organization, so we are not. We are to a very small part only a consultant or an advisor. But it's more, because that's more the question of the business model. So when it comes to the question, who pays you? Is it the client or is it the rights holder? So once the client pays you, so the brand who spends the money or the broadcaster, you are acting as a consultant. If the rights holder pays you, then normally you are getting a cut on the total revenues, right? And this is still what we are and what we want to be. Okay. First and foremost, right? So, but I'm just more saying, that the business model has changed to a more value creating capacity on an agency level, more than just negotiation skills. So let's take another example, maybe on the brand side. So, finding access to brands from a rights holder perspective is a challenge. Why? Because first of all, you don't scale as a business. If you're a football club, you have just let's say a limited number of people you can employ to reach out to brands. So you're not really scalable. Second is the intelligence behind. So the entire sales process within Sportfive is data driven and data based. So having access to these first party data or third party data for a rights holder is nearly impossible, right? When it comes to, I was talking about a sales platform which contains a proper pre-qualification of a brand, then this is something an agency can do it, because we are representing 100 plus rights holders, and we have scale. Right. But for a single rights holder, it's not possible. It's not doable. Yeah. And therefore,
the biggest boys can do it. I mean, the Man U's are doing it, right, and the Man Cities of the world are doing it themselves. But you're right. I think there is a broad spectrum of the everyone else who he can't afford it and won't have that firepower of what an agency like Sportfive can bring, right?
Yeah, and it's also not easy to build. You have to say, let's take again a football club. The core business of a football club is Saturday afternoon 3:30 in Germany, right? That's when the matches are kicked off, and the core. They need to win matches, to win points, and to hopefully win whatever championships or prevent a relegation. So that's their core. And what we always experience also in the past, that within a football club, it's not only the scale, but also it's sometimes the classical sales DNA, the mindset really to put utmost focus on all the commercial processes is not really there. And this is where we kick in, and where we believe that we can add value as an agency to that process.
No, interesting. Right. And like I said, I'm just thinking out loud here. It's I think, as I said, it's a challenging model. My belief is that rights holders need to be a lot more directly, what you mentioned earlier, direct with the consumer, which means they need to build their own OTT. They can't rely on hoping to God someone is continuously buying their rights. And so, again, the role as the agent is changing there dramatically. And, and we can probably, I'm sure we'll have some more conversations on that. But watching our time a little bit, I have a couple more other things I want to talk to you about. And that is esports, right, which we both know is growing like crazy. I know you have your own division or team in it as well, looking at it, and you have a couple of good clients already. Talk to me about through that. How much do you see the similarities in traditional sports and esports? That's what I see, and that's what I tell people. But how do you guys look at this?
Yeah, maybe to just look back a few years. So we started our esports operation about 4 years ago, and that was a little bit of coincidence, because we had a good handful of people within the organization working on traditional sports, but having a passion in esports. And they came to me and said, the market is so big, let's look at that, and maybe let's see whether we can translate our core services, which is selling sponsorships, selling media rights, into esports. And we said, yeah, let's give it a try. And we started small with a team, actually from Germany, but funny enough, they made it now up to the world's final in League of Legends, which I just played right now, which is called Unicorns of Love.
Okay,
that's the name of the team, and we have been able to broker some small deal like 20,000, 25,000 euros at the time. So, and the deal size was not important to us. Important to us was to identify that there is a possibility for brands, and there is a need for brands in general to look at that space, and that space was not taken by anybody else, right? And that's when we started to create a portfolio, when we started to hire people, and again, we didn't do any funny things with whatever buying teams or investing in a publisher or organizing esports event. It was very much really using our sales power, our access to brands, to help brands to better understand the esports ecosystem. Yeah. So meanwhile, we have a great relationship with Riot Games for marketing and commercializing particularly the LEC, which is a European franchise league, similar to the Football Champions League in Europe, with franchises from all over the place in Europe. And then we are also having partnerships in Asia with T1, for example, the biggest actually esports clan in the world, from Korea, which we represent in the same way we do with some other esports teams. And so that's the way how we have developed ourselves into that space. And for me, esports is the biggest opportunity in our sports industry. And again, COVID is not, let's say, the initiator of that, but it's certainly the accelerator of esports in today's life, right? And if you see, League of Legends has increased the viewership, the audience, by 70% only this year. So the audience numbers are going through the roof. And we today have hardly any conversation with a brand without touching esports as a topic. And this really gives us a lot of credit for what we have been doing, and also a lot of backwind also now to go ahead and to further invest in that space.
Yeah. And I'm very happy to hear this too, because pretty much what you just said, and I would agree with almost every single word of it, is exactly what we've done too. A couple of years ago, we started Total Esports, as coming out of Total Sports Asia. And it's the same idea. It's so obvious that brands do not understand the ecosystem yet, and therefore need to be educated. Guys like us, great minds think alike here for sure. And I think we'll give ourselves a bit of credit there. But I do agree. I think it's a huge opportunity globally. The numbers are speaking for themselves. We should talk a bit more about, like I said, we're doing some really interesting stuff in the Middle East as well, and with a few other interesting projects. So I'll tell you more about it offline here. But as we are sort of slowly wrapping up our conversation, and as I said, there is so much more we could talk about, but there's always a time limit here to this. So one thing I've always liked to touch a bit on, and someone like yourself who's had such a long, illustrious career, there are moments where you're on the top of the world, you won something, or you win a big deal, and then of course there are moments where things don't work so well. And tell us a bit, give me a couple of things here. Sort of, what would you consider were your sort of highlights in your 25 years here?
Yeah, I think, some of the highlights we just talked about, right? I mean, investing together with a private equity firm in your own company, I think is a highlight for itself.
Yep.
Again, now, to be, in a situation where we are now after the takeover of HIG, really trying to grow that company from where it is, I think it's a huge opportunity and certainly a highlight of my career. But there have been always also highlight in business. And I think one was, for example, when we won the business with the UEFA back in 2006 for the worldwide media rights of the Euro 2008, which is a $1 billion business, which was a $1 billion business at the time. Yep. A great achievement for the company, great achievement for us as a team at the time. And these were moments in time where you said, this is really fantastic.
That was under the Sportfive umbrella at that time, or what was the name of the company when you guys had that deal?
That was the first Sportfive,
exactly. Sportfive 1.0 here. Now, what was the worst moments? What are the stuff where you're going, oops, this didn't work?
A lot of things didn't work, unfortunately. But I think these are exactly the moments where you learn the most.
Yep.
I think with the latest experience with UFA Sports, we had a very dark moment when one of the clubs in Germany, Alemannia Aachen, for those ones who know them, had to declare insolvency from one day to another. We just had invested I think 8 million or 6 million of euros, and that money was gone and went down the drain within a second. I think the entire damage was far higher than that. Was 10 million plus, and then you suddenly realize for still a company of that size, this is something which can kill you, and to realize that, and then to try to manage against it, that was really tough, and obviously attached with some sleepless nights.
Was that that was Lagardere at that time, or which?
No, that was UFA Sports. With Lagardere, we had always, or with Sportfive, we had also a moment in time when I think it was the right idea, maybe a bit too early, when we invested in a company called Sport Digital. It was a streaming portal in Germany for all kind of team sports from the second layer, so below football, which is handball, volleyball, basketball, hockey, etc.
Yeah, I remember
that. And we invested like 10 million in developing that, and then we realized, that the consumption rate was so low, and actually, the fact that people were not really ready to spend money on a new technical invention, where we say, okay, I think we sold it for €1 more or less a few years later, and then to realize that you have maybe the right idea, and either it didn't work out because of the wrong execution, or maybe because the market was just not ready for it. But it was a painful experience as well.
Timing is everything for sure. I've tried one of those, I think, 3 times now. The first one was around 2000, where similar, if you remember, all these portals were coming up, right? And we were already looking at, we called it totalsports.tv. So we were way ahead of that time. I know no one even knew what the OTT was. Then we tried one around the similar sort of 2010. And then, of course, our last one, which was called Sportfive a few years ago here, which was OTT. And I was convinced this was our chance to get away from the agency model and finally enter the distribution side of the business. But I think I realized, and maybe similar to our friends from DAZN are realizing, you need a very, very large checkbook to make that work.
Exactly.
And if you don't have that, then it's probably not such a good idea. And so that's an interesting one as well. I think, these scars, battle scars we all have, hopefully we learn something from it, and then we can bring them into the next business or into the next ideas, which we're all working on there. So, yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah.
I mean, have you guys ever looked at, doing something in OTT on your own, or you're sort of steering away from that?
No, I think, OTT, to a large degree will be the future of many, many rights holders, in the market. We are not a tech firm, so it's not about us, creating an OTT. I think, we would rather be the ones who are operating and running an OTT, because, and this is, I think, also a painful experience for some of the rights holders who have invested in OTT. It's not enough just to invest in technology, right? Technology is maybe the foundation and the prerequisite, but at the end of the day, the key to a successful OT operation is a proper management. And this is a day-to-day operation, producing relevant content every day, reaching out to your target group, doing the marketing right, etc., to run that properly. And this is more to what we look at and where we can add value as an agency rather than, the technical side. There are others who can do that much better than us.
Yeah, I agree. Our friends from Delta Trey and others. Now,
Exactly.
While we're wrapping it up here, your career started in Hamburg 25 years ago plus. And you're always still in Hamburg. Where your entire period, were you always based out of Hamburg, or you were at some other parts in the world at one point in time?
No, unfortunately, maybe unfortunately, it was always Hamburg, right?
Okay.
So, obviously, we were all traveling a lot, but our base was always Hamburg.
Oh, okay. All right. It's kind of cool. Good stuff there.
No.
Now, the last one here, with everything we know is happening around the world, and the two of us, I'm sure, follow this as close as anyone. What is your best guess? When are we going to come out of this, and how are we going to come out of this in the world of sports? Esports, I think we touched already, but let's stick to our real world of sports. How long do you think it's going to take, and and how long it's going to, not just take to come out of COVID, which none of us really knows anyway, many other reasons for that. But when do you think the industry will start to sort of, recover?
So I think that's certainly not an easy question, and there's certainly not only one answer to it. So the only thing what I really believe is that sports is hope. And sports is and will always be a very, very good platform for brands and broadcasters to operate with. And therefore, my hope is, that sports as a genre will come out stronger than it was before, because people need something they look ahead to. People need compensation also for all the difficult times they are experiencing right now, and therefore for me, sport is a very good vehicle and platform for a better future after COVID, and once hopefully the economy will recover. We see now in our business that obviously a lot of things don't happen. On the other side, there are a lot of also very positive signals, a lot of great deals we have created. We just signed a deal quite lately, for substantial 2-digit million deal with an automotive brand and cycling, right. which confirms and underlines the strength and still the ability also of brands to act. What's a bit missing, obviously, is everything what's connected with audience. So our strong hospitality business, which we operate, for example, in Germany, with 100 million plus revenues in a normal year, that is obviously under a lot of pressure as long as people cannot access arenas, and this will change one day. We don't know. We are now in a budgeting process, and we are not foreseeing any substantial change within the next couple of months for sure. But one day it will come back. But on the sponsorship side, we see some really great deals happening even in these times, and you see some of the brand categories are even benefiting from the COVID times. If you're looking at food chains and some others, which are prepared to spend good money also on these kind of deals.
Yeah, and that's good to hear. Like I said, I mean, I think one thing I always see is that during those times, brands really pull back and pull back hard, right, and fast, because they don't even know what's happening. And so the conversations do become always about, let's talk about next year. And even now, I think next year already looks like it's around the corner, and still no one knows what's going to happen. So it's an interesting one. So I think we'll all be watching it. Now, you just threw out a number here, which sort of triggers off that I have to ask a question, and I'll leave it to you whether you want to answer. What's the sort of top line of the group now? With 1,000 people, what is the sort of official revenue numbers there?
Yeah, Marcus, unfortunately, that's something I can't talk about.
Okay. That's okay, fair enough.
If you're interested, you might find some references in the official publishing of.
I'll Google it.
Or Lagardere. Exactly.
Okay, not a problem.
Exactly.
Excellent. Yeah. Robert, that was awesome. Thank you for your time here. I really enjoyed this, going through some of the the interesting stories there of the different groups you were part of, from Sportfive and UFAs, and of course the Lagaderes of the world, and now back to Sportfive. So I wish you and the rest of the team there best of luck. And please say hello, of course, to some of them, some of the folks who I know well inside, and we might not see each other at the moment at the Sportels here, but I'm sure we'll catch up somewhere and keep talking to each other.
Yeah, Marcus, thanks again for the invitation. I'm sure we catch up pretty soon.
Definitely. All the best.
Okay.
Cheers.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luhr podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luhr. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.